So welcome back to another Thursday on the Pagan Perspective. And this week we are asking your questions to us as individuals. So I got quite a few awesome questions and I'm really excited to answer these. So the first one, and I'm going to do this in the order that they came in, comes from Soul Seeker, and they have 3 questions actually, which are awesome. They write, I'm sure you've addressed this before, but I've not heard. You are non-theistic pagan. What, if anything, is transcendent for you? What does your practice connect you with? How would you describe your path? So, wow, I love these. These are huge. And first off, in terms of transcendent, the answer to all of these questions kind of blend in together. So for me, I think about existence and about myself and nature as this incredibly expansive, interconnected, exciting place. I don't just think about me as this one person, one identity, one thing, right? I think about myself as a collection of literally trillions of beings, and not just, the cells that have my human DNA, but all the trillions of my little gut biome, and those on my skin, and that's just talking about what makes this body work, and then what's connected to that. So this apricot tree here, and the cat who's sitting directly behind the camera and distracting me, the crow that you can hear, and the finches and everything. And that's just this close in here. But also I think about what's important to me is looking at not just this little tiny bit, but the expansive, this city, which is actually, so big. It's not that big of a city, we're 100,000 or something, that is so big that it's hard for me to conceptualize it, and my state and my country and my planet and my solar system and the galaxy and all of these things that I'm part of. For me, that's all exciting and sacred, and I get excited about that. We're so many generations of stars that went supernova to create me, to create us, and that this body is an unbroken chain back to Yucca, last universal common ancestor. And so for me, this is all of this exciting stuff. And that, on one level I feel so tiny, right? Learning about and trying to conceptualize and feel connected, it helps me to feel so tiny that I'm not a blink, not even the muscle twitch to begin a blink in this universe. And yet at the same time, who was it? Was it Sagan who said that we are the way that the universe, or a way that the universe sees itself? So I guess all of this is sort of rambling around to basically say that this is enough for me. I don't need something beyond this. This is already magnificent and incredible, and the more that I learn, the more that I experience, the deeper the mystery and the deeper the beauty becomes. So I don't look at trying to go beyond this. I don't look at there being something more or better, but I like to sit with and be comfortable that this is incredible, and my very existence is so astronomically unlikely, so just mind-boggling that I'm here, that I am, that you are, that this version of me got to be here. And I don't, believe that I'm a soul floating around and inhabiting bodies. I believe that I am this body, and that this body is this massive collection that keeps changing. Excuse me. So I'm just going to inhale some insects there. So all of that, I think, is nature. And the second part of this question is, so what does my practice connect me with? And for me, it's trying to be really mindful and have gratitude with all of that, with being part of this incredible existence. And recognizing that I only see this very tiny, narrow slice from my particular point of view in history, from my species, which is this very short-lived, unique species that is just one of billions, if not trillions, of beings that not only exist on this planet, but all over. Get into the fun numbers of that. And really trying to be conscious of, as I said, nature. And when I talk about nature, or as I like to call it, reality, I'm talking about the great cycle of birth, growth, life, death, decay, and regeneration. And typically we see that in terms of earth life, right? The way that we're familiar with that, Lion King, circle of life type of thing, that this leaf is going to drop onto the soil here, and it's going to be broken down by microorganisms, which is the decay, and from that we're going to get the regeneration and the birth that comes from the soil that is then reused in a tree, and on and on and on. But that happens on every scale, and it's actually like super humbling to think about that. So that's happening on this microscopic scale, but it's also happening on the size of galactic resource recycling. And recognizing that I'm part of that is sort of the belief and intellectual part. In terms of the path, I don't as much like the word path, because sometimes it implies sort of a linearity or a predeterminedness to it, which I don't really see it as. For me, it's more of a practice, and that really involves taking, within that whole context, taking responsibility, taking power, taking my own agency in all of that, and saying, so I'm going to make choices. Like, I am very blessed and lucky to be this species that has choice in the way that I do, and of course I value it simply because I am part of a species that evolved to value it. But I'm grateful for that, and I have this incredible opportunity and power to make these choices about how I'm going to live, and I want to do it in the way that's going to be most emotionally rewarding, most constructive and positive, and that really helps further the values that I have in terms of what my personal and cultural values are, in terms of taking care of my community, taking care of not just my community as my human community, but my larger community, and all of that. So I've probably spent a long time talking about that one topic, or 3 questions, I guess, but they were excellent, and I would really love, it was the first one to come in, but I also wanted to talk about that because I think that gives the context for this whole conversation on the continuum to answer these questions. So, the next question is from Phil Christophers, who asks basically what I think about the power of hair, specifically the myth of Samson, and an event which happened where there were Native American trackers that were recruited by the military, and when their hair was cut, they lost their tracking ability. So, what do I think about that, and have I noticed a lessening of my psychic powers? So, there's 2 things that I think about hair, in general. The first one is that it is a symbol, it's a signal for us on a very biological level, that healthy hair, you know, your long, lush, healthy hair, is a signal of health and fertility. So if you see a female with this really shiny hair, you know that she's getting good nutrients, she's eating those, you know, healthy fats, which are letting her break down the fat-soluble vitamins. Obviously she has plenty to eat and she's able to take care of herself. This is like a great mate. Like, you want to make babies with this lady. That's the signal that hair can send on just this purely biological level. And so the second part is cultural. And personally, that's what I suspect was happening, with the trackers losing their ability to track, is that they had a very strong connection of a symbolic idea of what it represented. And it was so strong that that belief was able to influence how they experienced the world. And of course that's what I think magic is. So my guess is that's what was going on. For me, my personal association. Now I suspect that this question was asked because about 6 months ago I shaved my head, and you guys can tell I did, you know, about I take it down to 3/16 every 3 weeks or so. And for me, it's been a really positive and empowering experience on a lot of levels. First, I'm super practical, and I bought a $12 set of clippers, and that's it. I don't have to spend money on products and on haircuts and all of that, and so I love that level of practical. But also, for me, the association when I see my shaved head, my honest kind of internal dialogue is, damn, you look like a badass. And so for me, as I said, that's exciting and empowering. I like the low maintenance of it. I'm a swimmer, so I love hopping out of the pool and not having to do anything. And I've personally experienced, as I mentioned, it feels very empowering to me. I have noticed a difference in how I'm treated. And I don't know how much of that has to do with my personal relationship to myself and therefore how I present myself, but also how the world is perceiving me. And I think a couple things go into that. One, being a natural redhead, when it comes out of my hair, it's pretty dark, but the longer it gets, the more sun bleached and the redder it gets, and then the cool chemicals don't help with that. There's always been kind of a weird, like, entitlement that people think they get to comment on my appearance and, like, ask me if it's natural and weird stuff like that. And I don't know the rest of it. I mean, people will assume that I'm a lesbian, and not give me as much, like, weird sexual trouble as people used to, that they somehow think that it's okay to, like, to direct kind of inappropriate attention, and I haven't gotten any of that. At least I haven't perceived that. It doesn't mean that people haven't been getting that with short hair. So it's been very empowering for me. And I think that it really depends on what the symbol means to you. So I think if I believed that it was a negative and shameful thing, then that's how I would experience it. But because to me it's a symbol of my personal power, then I experience it very differently. So I don't feel like it has lessened my mental ability or anything like that. It's actually very it feels very refreshing and liberating every time I shave. So now the next question, and I'm never really sure how to pronounce your name, I apologize, but they post comments all the time and I really love reading them, and it's rendilkraesin, and they just ask ISTP question mark. And this was on the video 2 weeks ago where we were talking about pagans at college, and I mentioned my personality type. And so I assume what's being asked is that the personality type? Now that's one of the 16 Myers-Briggs personality types, and I think that's pretty spot on, actually. I think the argument could be made that I'm an ISTJ, And I think this stands for introspective, sensing, thinking, perception, and the J would be judging. And it's so these personality types are tools to describe different characteristics, and by no means are this, is that the be-all, end-all written in stone, but they can be useful tools. I think that the first three for me are spot on, and there's absolutely no question, like, that's where I'm at. In terms of the perception and judging, I think that I'm somewhere maybe in between, or it depends on the case. In terms of why I would say the J is because I am very goal-oriented. I'm very self-motivated. I make deadlines for myself, and I keep those deadlines. I make checklists, and I cross them out, and it's the most satisfying thing in the world to cross things off the checklist. But at the same time, I'm able to really go with the flow on things and let go. I'm not sure. I think that things like that can be very useful in giving us vocabulary to talk about our different personalities and to talk about the relationship between different personality types. I've got one here from our own Danni, and they write, "You just published your first book, yay. Any plans for writing more? How has your book been received in your opinion?" So yeah, there's a link to that in the description below. I think what Danny's referring to is my book called Pagan Guided Meditations. I've also published, I'm doing a novella series called The Marsborn, which is a fictional series about the first generation of children, and not so children as they grow up, because we follow them through their lives, born on the Red Planet. So that's the Marsborn series, or marsbornseries.com. But going back to the pagan one, that was the first one I did, and I've been really very pleasantly surprised that it's done very well. I did it one because I wanted to share that with people, and the other reason is that I wanted to kind of learn the ropes in self-publishing before I did some of my Mars-related stuff. Some of you guys know my main focus in life right now is I run a website called livingontheredplanet.com, also a link in the description below. And so through that, I'm writing a nonfiction book by the same title, and then the fiction series. So I wanted to practice to get, I worked in print media doing layout and design for many years. And so I'd laid out, dozens of other people's books and never laid out my own. So it was exciting to do my own and to learn how to do the e-publishing. And I just kind of put it out there and didn't really expect that much was going to happen with it. But I was I've been very humbled that it's been super well received. That's the neighbor looking for their dog. It's been really super well received, and there's been a lot of downloads, and people have seemed to really appreciate it. So I'm very grateful for that and glad it's out there. In terms of plans for future books, so I release one, The Marsborn, every month. So kind of on a tight schedule there. But in terms of pagan, yes, for sure. I have several books outlined. I'm a plotter. I plot like everything, as I mentioned, checklists. And so I have several different pagan books that I'd like to release, and I've learned a lot, so I'm excited to release those pagan books. And I don't know, I've always kind of fantasized about maybe doing something with the pagan perspective, like, alright, so my batteries died, which is why the lights changed. It's probably a signal that I'm already going way too long on this video. Anyways, I had been saying about that, some sort of like collaborative something has always sort of been a fantasy of mine. So I'm going to try and move through the next questions a little bit quickly, but still giving them the due that they deserve, because they're awesome. So the next one comes from Maestro Guy, and I don't know and they ask, why am I here? And I don't know if that means like they stumbled on the video and were like, what is this? I don't know why I'm here. Or if that's more of a serious question of like, hey, why am I on this planet? Like, what am I doing here? Or, and actually I kind of dislike that term, why am I on this planet? Because it implies that like you're on it, not part of it. But anyways, so my answer to that is honestly, I think it's because you are incredibly, unbelievably lucky, like we were talking about before. Now, the last question here is from Tim Stevens, and I saved this one for the last because the question came in like 5 or 6 days ago, and I've really been actually struggling with it all week, like how am I going to even answer this question, because there's a lot of different starting places to it. It's below, but the gist of it is that they ask, what do I have to say about Native American influences within the modern spectrum of paganism? They believe that folks of today owe a lot to early Native Americans. And then, I guess yesterday did a little bit of an add-on that said, they're specifically asking in terms of the thinking and behavioral side of things. That early Native American minds seem to be one with nature, and that's, yeah, and so that was the motivation for asking that. So the reason that I've kind of been struggling with this is that when I answer a question, I'm very intentional and conscious about where I'm coming from when I answer that. And there's a lot of different places that I could begin with this. For instance, one of them is I could come from the place of my personal ethnic heritage, which typically surprises people because they have a very hard time seeing past the freckles and red hair. Although once they know, they can kind of be like, oh, okay, I see that. And I guess in their defense, like I do identify much more strongly with my Celtic side, and don't really talk about the rest of my family heritage. I'm not sure I'd really call it heritage, but my ethnic background, I suppose. And the other place that I'm coming from, or possible place I could come from with that, is that I am from New Mexico. I'm from northern New Mexico, and where I grew up, we have, let me just throw some numbers around, there's over 220,000 Indians. That's 1 in 10 people. So I grew up with Indians as my neighbors. That, I lived on the reservation for 4 years. Some of my first romantic partners were Native. The school that I went to was actually on tribal ground. So for me, it's a very, Indians are real people, and I don't mean to be disrespectful in what I'm saying in terms of people who don't live around Native Americans, and I use the terms interchangeably because here, when I've asked families, like my ex's family, what's the preferred term, and they're like, well, Indian, like we've been Indians for the last 500 years, like whether it's Indian or Indios, like since Onyate, that's what we've been called. So that's the preferred term here, but that, I don't know what it is for other people. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. And so I have a very, lifelong experience with multiple different tribes, primarily the 8 northern Pueblos, although really more specifically 4 of those. And I do recognize that that's the Puebloans are one particular smaller umbrella. So I've got, a lot of really strong memories and emotional connections there, and, all this kind of mixed up stuff. And so that's a very vulnerable, both of those places to come from are very vulnerable places, and very emotionally charged. And so what I want to do with this, rather than coming from those places of, my personal relationship with some very specific tribes out of a whole continent worth of people, both very, very positive and some very challenging experiences. I want to talk about what I think most people, not everybody, but most of the time when modern pagans talk about Native American spirituality, and again, I really don't mean to be offensive about this, but I think most of the time the people who are doing that don't have experience with very many people or very much experience with people from those cultures. And there's a couple reasons why I think that. One of the first things I think reasons is that typically people will say Native American culture. I'm like, well, which culture, right? This is an entire continent worth of people, of hundreds and hundreds of tribes and different takes. So I want to be very clear that I am not trying to be disrespectful or in any way trying to downplay any real contributions that have been made from different Native American tribes, or individuals, or even tribal groups, as not just an individual tribe, but the related communities and all of that. What I'm saying is that I think that some of the ideas that we attribute to being specifically from Native American spirituality, I think perhaps is connecting with roots that everyone has, and in everyone's history and background, and then it might be something in themselves that they're projecting onto this particular group. And I don't know if that's a good thing, it's a bad thing, I don't know, but it seems like it's an important thing that is being at least given voice, even if it's not truly from the people who it's being claimed are. So this is a super long video. I might have to edit it down because I don't want it to be, like 40 or 50 minutes long. We'll see how long it came out. You guys had awesome questions. Thank you so much. The subs are going to be doing this also, so on their videos this month, ask them questions and they will be answering it for you next month. And I guess see you in July, right? Yes. Okay, take care.